Okay, good to luck, everyone. Sorry for the late start. Let's get right to it now. The 3 lines from the top of Daf Kuf Nun Amud Aleph. 3 lines from the top of Kuf Nun Amud Aleph. So the Gemara wanted to bring a raya that although it says karka, it could mean metaltalin too. And the raya it brought is because if somebody says he's giving everything to his Eved Tony except for some karka, so then of course Tony doesn't get it because maybe he's keeping Tony, who's karka, for himself. The Gemara says the same thing would be if he said he's giving everything to Tony except for some metaltalin. So although it says karka over there, it also refers to metaltalin. So says the Gemara 3 lines from the top, no raya. Hasam b'dinhu deloy lisnei karka. You're right, over there it shouldn't say karka because it's true even if he kept some metaltalin. But v'aydi detana reisha Rebbe Kiva Aimer karka kolshu. If you have a minuscule amount of karka, chayeves bepeya, you have to take the corner of the field for the poor. Ubi bikurim and first fruits. V'lichtav aleim pruzbel. And in the event that the one who took the loan has a smallest piece of karka, you're allowed to write a pruzbel. And even with the smallest amount of karka, you could make a kinyan agav. And you could buy through the smallest amount of karka 100 bolim balls. By just making on the karka kinyan with kesef shtar chazaka. So since over there in the beginning it started talking about karka, that's why it says karka. Shemachi kedani karka. Now the second thing that they wanted to say is that it says that if you give everything away as a shchib meirah and you leave a karka kolshu, it doesn't really mean karka kolshu, smallest amount. It means enough that you could be supported with. So the Gemara says, "V'kol heicha detani kolshu lesle shiura," where it says kolshu, it doesn't mean a small amount. Excuse me. So he asked, how could you say it means karka enough to be supported with? It says kolshu. And kolshu means a kolshu, a minuscule amount. So the Gemara says, well, it doesn't only mean a minuscule amount. The kolecha detani kolshu lesle shura. But Tanan, Reb Daisa ben Hirkin Esaimer, we know that there's a rare mitzvah called Reishis Hagez, that you have to give the first of your fleece to the kohen. Now, how much? Reb Daisa ben Hirkin Esaimer chamesh v'chelis. It has to be a minimum of 5 sheep. Geizes, the correct guess is geizes, each one sheared, monopras. If you have mana and a half from each of them, chayeves bereishis hagez. The chachamim say not so. Chamesh v'chelis geizes even kolshein, even a small amount. But it doesn't mean a small amount. It doesn't mean a tiny amount. It means that together it has to equal to 1 monopras. You don't need 5 monopras. You have to equal to 1 monopras as long as each one participates in an equal amount. Monopras, a mana and a half. It's divided equally amongst the 5. So you see, it uses the term kol shein, even though it doesn't mean really a minuscule amount. So the Gemara says, no, over there it uses kol shein in a relative sense. Hasam b'dinhu deloy lisnei kolshu. Really shouldn't have said kolshu. But v'aydi the kamatana kama shir rabba, 5 times a mana and a pras. In contrast, amar ionami shiura zutra, since it's all 5 of them only have to be 1 mana and a pras, karila kolshu. Relative to the big amount, this is a small amount, but not that normally when it says kolshu, it could mean other than a minuscule amount. Now, Pshita, it's obvious, Omar metaltale laplanya, if the dying man says, I'm giving my movables to so-and-so, kol monei tashmish dekani, the person gets all the furniture, levar mechite v'sari, he doesn't get wheat and barley. Kol metaltale laplanya, all my movables to so-and-so, then afilu chite v'sari, he gets even the detached wheat and barley. Not only that, vafilu rechayim ha'elyoina, even the upper mill, which moves on the lower mill, and it's movable, kana. Levar rechayim ha'tachtoin, except for the lower mill, because the lower mill, it is attached to the ground. Now, it's not actually attached to the ground, but it's never moved, because it lies on the ground. If he says, kol de metalto, anything that moves, then afilu rechaim atachtona kain, even gets the mill underneath, because that can move. Now, ibayelu avda kimikarka or kimitaltalu dami. Shelley has a slave, Tony. Does it have a din of real estate or a din of money? So Amalei Ravacha Bered Ravavil Ravashi Tajma Hamoicher Esa'ir. This is actually today's Mishnah Yomis. Hamoicher Esa'ir. If you sell a city, together with the city Macher Batim Shichanum Oris, you sell the houses, the trenches, the caves, Umerchetzois, the bathhouses, Ubeis Abadim, the olive presses, Ubeis Hashlachin. Avaloya Semetaltim, but not the movables. Ubizman Shamar he v'kol masha b'seicha, when he says it and everything inside it, even if he has animals or servants, that's sold together with it. So you see clearly here that servants has a din of metaltalin, because it says normally it wouldn't be sold with the metaltalin. Then, but if he says it and everything in it, then arikula mechurim. So it's a movable. That's why initially it's not sold. We didn't say but if it's like karka, why isn't it like the basra and all of these things? Amai loim is zavin. So says the Gemara, you're telling me that an Evan is like metalton. Then what do you mean even avodim? If you say even kol masha b'soicha, you get even the avodim. If it's metalton, of course you get the avodim. Why does it say even? Even. So it must be that there's a difference between alamayis lachlameimer, shani metaltala denayid me metaltala denayid. There's a difference between movables that move on their own steam to movables that don't move on their own steam. The same thing is true. There could be a difference between karka, afilu teimik karka idami, shani mekarka denayid, a karka that can move on its own steam like an evid, and mekarka deloynayid, a karka that can't move on its own steam like a dovecote or a beisabad.
What's the significance of karka moving? Karka is not a movable thing.
You're right.
So what's the significance?
You just said it. Therefore, it might be a class on its own. You just said it. Now, Amalei Ravina the Ravashi Tajma. Now the Gemara brings another raya. Hakaisiv la'avdoi kol nechasiv. If somebody writes, Shelley writes to his slave Tony all his property, Yatsa ben Chayrin. So then the slave goes free because he's included in all the property and he gets all the property. Shire karka kolshu, if he leaves a small amount of karka, lo Yatsa ben Chayrin, because maybe what he meant to leave was the evet. And then if the evet doesn't go free, he doesn't get anything else because kol masha kana evet kana rabbi. Except for 1/10,000th of it. And he's saying that this evet is only worth 1/10,000th of it, so he's keeping that for himself, and then the evet gets nothing. V'amar Avdimi bar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Lazar, asu metaltal and shir eitzel eved. He said, if Shelley says that I'm giving away everything except for a certain amount of metaltalin, so that could include an eved. V'lei asu metaltalin shir eitzel ksuva. But they didn't make metaltalin a shear by ksuva. Now, this is a special din that in the event, we had this at the end of last night's Gemara. If a man gave his property to his sons at the time of his death, and he gave some karka to his wife also, so the din is that the wife forgave her ksuva. But that's only if he gave her karka, not if he gave her metaltal.
What does the first member mean again? Also metaltal shir eitzel eved?
That means if he says, I'm giving everything to Tony except for some metaltal. So he said included in that could be Tony.
Oh, okay.
Now, V'amalei Rav of Nachman, my time, why if he leaves some metalton do we say it might refer to Tony, and therefore Tony doesn't go free? Because Avda metalton, Avda is movable. And if he therefore says that he's keeping some metalton, it could be Tony, and therefore Tony doesn't go free, and if he doesn't go free, he doesn't get anything. Uksuva is isha mekarka, but the ksuva of an isha is karka, if he gives his wife a certain amount of metaltalin, that doesn't exempt him from giving her the ksuva. Amalei.
Why is it ksuba only?
1 second, please. Amalei, the lien of the ksuva is on karka. Amalei, so he tells him, you have to understand, the reason why, if Chatzkel tells Shelley, you have everything except for metaltalin, it's not because we say that the Eved might be that metaltalin. Maybe Eved is karka. But it's because an Eved has a din like an Isha. It's a get shichra. And a get, there has to be creases. There has to be total severance. And since he's keeping something for himself, it's not total severance. Amalei, anan mishum delav krus gita masninoma. It's not because the Eved is metaltal. It's because it's not a complete severance.
He's not keeping the Eved, he's keeping metaltal. What does it have to do with the Eved?
Because the get, it's like somebody says, here's the get, on the condition you don't drink wine forever. So that's not a crisis.
He's freeing the Eved by giving him everything? That's what he's doing.
Right.
So therefore, if he's not giving him everything, so then it's a shear.
Right, it's a shear. Now, Amar Rav Nachman. Rav says the name of Nachman, Chamisha ad sheyichtavu kol nichseim. 5 cases, it's binding only when you give away all of your property. Because we know, if he doesn't give away all of his property, then when he gets better, he doesn't get it back. Only if he gives away all of his property, then if he gets better, he gets it back. Avdai, it's only, the Eved only goes free if he gives him everything. If he keeps something, the Eved doesn't go free. Ishtai, this is a law that we learned, that if a man says that he's giving his wife everything when he has children, he's only making her an apotropos. He's only making her executor. Ubanav, his children, and Mavrachas, a woman that's trying to hide her money from her new husband. So these last two, we're going to explain. So we're going to explain all five. Shchib Meirah, a dying man, Didnan, Shchib Meirah shekasav kol nechasav la'acherim, a dying man that writes all of his property to others, but v'shayir karka kolshu, but he keeps some karka for himself, which we said means some karka that he could be supported with. That shows that he did have in mind even if he gets better. Then matanasa kayemes if he gets better, even if he gets better. Lo yishayir karka kolshu, if he gave away everything, a person doesn't leave himself with nothing, then ein matanasa kayemes if he gets better. Avdai, his servant, that's what we said, if you give away everything, that nan, a case of kol nechas of la'avdai, if you give everything to your servant, so then he goes free, because included is the Eved. Yotze ben chayrin, shayir karka kolshu, but if he leaves a certain amount of karka, then we would say that he's leaving his Eved a certain amount of karka. Then, lo yotze ben chayrin. Ishtai, as I told you, Dam Rab Yudam Shmuel, HaKais of Kol Nechas of Leishtai, somebody that writes all his property to his wife, where he has children, Lo Yose El Apetropa. He only made her a executor. Those were one of the three examples of halacha b'lei taima. Banav, Ditnan HaKais of Kol Nechas of Lebanav. If he writes all of his property to his wife, his children, because of the ishtai karka kolshu, and he writes to his wife a small amount of karka, and she doesn't protest and say, "What about my ksuva?" Of the ksuvas, she loses the ksuva. Mavrachas. Now, mavrachas is a woman who she's remarrying, and she wants to keep the money from her second husband, the money from before. But mavrachas means she wants to hide it. So what's the case of mavrachas? The amar mavrachas tzricha shetichtov kol nechaseha. She has to say that all her estate is not to her husband. Now, what she does is, she has to write all of her estate to Shimon Klein. She writes all of her estate to Shimon Klein, then it's safe from the new husband. Now, why is that? We'll see. Ubekulahu, in all of these cases, metaltalei havishir. If he says except for metaltalin, that could mean except for the Eved. If he says except for the metaltalin, it could mean if he says except for the metaltalin, he's also leaving some money for himself, so therefore it's a matana, even if he gets better. All these cases are by metaltalin to levar miksuva. If he says that I'm giving all of this to my sons and I'm giving my wife metaltalin, and she doesn't say, what about my ksuva? She doesn't lose her ksuva. Why? The makarke tekin Rabbanan. Rabbanan made the ksuva on karka. On metaltalin, they didn't make the ksuva, like tekin Rabbanan. Amemar says, but if it's money that's mentioned in the ksuva, Amemar Amar metaltalin, if it's, let's say, movables that are mentioned in the ksuva, the ksuva, the isnu beinayu, and they're around, that it would be a shear. That's more chashiv. And if he says he's giving her that, and she doesn't say, what about my ksuva? She loses her ksuva. Now we're going to get definitions. Shimon will tell you it's very important. If you're a lawyer, you have to know what words mean. So Omar, if let's say Shalom says, Nichsi Laplani. If he says, my property goes to so-and-so, what's included in Shalom's property? Avdei Ikrei Nichse. Servants are called property. Did not akois of kol nechasav la'avdei. If he writes all of his property to his servant, so that includes his servant, Yotze ben Chayr. Are Ikrei Nichse. Real estate is called property. Did not nechasim she'esh lemachrayis. Nechasim she'esh lemachrayis is real estate. Niknen bekesef b'shtar b'chazaka. It's acquired with money, shtar and chazaka. So you see that nechasim is real estate. Glima ikrei nichse, but a cloak is also called property. Did not v'she'ein le'em achrayis, that's movables, like a cloak. Ein niknen ala b'mashicha. If it's heavy, it's acquired with mashicha. If it's light, it's agva. So you see that a cloak is also called property. Zuzei ikrei nichse. Money is called property. Did not v'she'ein le'em achrayis, like money. Niknin im nechasim sheyesh le'em achrayis can be acquired through agav. If you buy a piece of real estate, you get the money with it. Bekesef b'shtar v'chazaka. Ki hada Rav Papa avalei tracer alfei zuzei beichuzai. Rav Papa he had beichuzai owed him 12,000 zuz. Now he wanted Rav Shmuel bar Acha to pick it up, but he was afraid that they wouldn't pay him because they would say, if it gets lost, you'll hold me accountable. So Rav Papa transferred the $12,000 to Rav Shmuel. But how could he do that? He said coins can't be transferred to Chalipin. The coins weren't there. How did he do it? Akninu nehale Rav Shmuel bar Acha. He transferred it to Rav Shmuel bar Acha. Agav asifa de beise. He gave him the threshold of the house. He rented him the threshold of the house, and then he gave him the money. Agav the threshold of the house. So you see, money is also called nichsin. And Rav Papa was so appreciative that he retrieved his money. Ki also, when he came back with the money, nafak la'apei ad tavach. Rav Papa went all the way to Tavach to greet him. Shtara ikrei nichse. Documents are called nichse. Damar Rabba by Yitzchak shnei shtaros hein. This is a halacha that we learned earlier in the Masechta. There's two types of documents. Amar zachu b'sada zeh leploni. If I say to Yitzi, acquire this field for Yitzi, so I say to Yitzi, acquire this field for Yisrael, and write him a record of proof. So the din is, as soon as I told him to be Zaychanut, no backseats. But I could say, you know what, I don't want the record of proof. I could renege on the record of proof. I don't want people to think that I'm land poor. Chaza b'shtar, I could back out on the shtar, ve'ena chayza b'sad. But if I make the acquisition of Yisrael acquiring the field dependent on writing the record of proof, and since I could back out of the record of proof, so Almanas, if I say, be Zeichenet for Yisrael, Almanas shetichtav lo es hashtar, on the condition you write the record of proof, since I could back out of the record of proof, I could back out of Yisrael getting the property. Chazer bein b'shtar bein b'sad. Now, so far, we don't have a raya from here that shtar is called nechasa. But the Gemara says there's a third type of shtar. Rav Chia bar Avin Amar Rav Huna shloisha shtar say. There's a third type of shtar. Trei hani da amran, two that we mentioned. Idach Im Kodam Moicher because of a shtar, if the seller wrote the shtar ahead of time, he wanted that, that they should be able to do the deal, hat the trat. So he wrote the shtar ahead of time. Like we learned, you could write a shtar for the seller, even though the buyer is not there. When the buyer is zoiche in the karka, nikne shtar, he acquires the shtar kol makam shehu, wherever it is. It's a type of agav. V'zui sheshaninu nechasim she'ein la mechrayis. The shtar niknenim nechasim she'eish la mechrayis. It's acquired with agav b'kesed b'shtar b'chazaka. So again, we see that a shtar is considered nechasim. Okay, we're just going to change the channel over here.